Just carry that forward. Now here's somebody that maybe they got a raw deal in life. They were born that way or they had an accident. But the opportunity just to be them and not to second guess themselves. But like I said, the fun they can have, the opportunities, and to see them smack talking each other, just like I did in my days, it makes you go, okay, we're getting somewhere.
Hello and welcome to the Clarity Compass. My name is Greg Woodman, and I'm delighted today for our first guest, we have Bernie Ryan. So Bernie, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and what got you here on the Clarity Compass podcast.
Well, Greg, thanks for the invitation. I'm honored that you consider me for the first. Where did I come from?
Yeah, where'd you come from?
Where did I come from?
Where were you born?
I'm a Pennsylvania boy. I was actually born just down the road in Hollidaysburg. My dad was out at sea in the middle Mediterranean on the ship. He was in the U.S. Navy at the time. So my mother went home. He grew up in Harrisburg. My mother went home when I was born. She was with her parents. So I've always kind of teased my dad, we've had a little bit of separation here. You weren't there for me when I was born. So my dad and I were very close. We still are. Very close. So I was born there. After a couple of years with my father, in the Navy, he then took a position with a law firm in Philadelphia. We lived there for a few years. And then he was moved to the Harrisburg office, and we moved to Hershey, Pennsylvania. So I call Hershey where I grew up. From there, I had two brothers and a sister. There were 6 of us in a family. I came up here to Penn State. I decided that, I always kind of had in the back of my mind, I'd like to be a pilot, a Navy pilot. And so I was offered a Navy ROTC scholarship to attend Penn State. And I found a way to take 4 years, stretch it into 5, made it into the first national championship year, got to see them beat Nebraska on the famous game before I headed to Florida for flight school. And then the Navy for 20 years. When I was actually going to stay longer than 20, but I started doing some timing with the children in school and stuff. I thought maybe it's time to settle down, stop moving every 2 to 3 years. I was working at the Pentagon at the time. And so I took a job with Penn State. I was torn between that and going to government contracting, which was a typical route a lot of military people after they've done especially a career. And I was helping design a new plane in the Navy to replace the plane I flew. That plane was called a P3. Now the new one is out there. It's called a P8. But I was in the early stages of that, which was exciting. I was getting to use my engineering degree a little bit. The economy had really slowed down because 9/11 had happened in 2001. So Penn State offered me a job in doing political advocacy work. I was splitting my time between the Alumni Association, working with alumni, getting them active, writing their state legislators, and obviously governmental affairs because I had to work closely with them, knowing what we were talking about. And then after 2 years of that, I had the opportunity to go back to fly again with FedEx. So I finished up my career flying planes around the world for FedEx. And then I said, time to stop, and that's where I'm now.
And when did you choose to retire here in Happy Valley?
Well, I left the Navy and got up here to Happy Valley in the fall of 2002. I graduated from Penn State in 82. So it's been roughly 20 years when I left. And now I was back. And then I've been here since the fall of 2002.
Got it. And so when did you meet your wife? And as you moved around, what year was that? And then 2 kids came along the way.
Well, I watched the famous Nebraska game.
82.
In 1982. And he was in bounds.
Okay.
There's no question about that. So from there, I headed to Pensacola, Florida, where Navy Flight School starts. It finished in Texas. While I was there, I would see this tall, lanky woman at church. And her sister actually was in my apartment complex. She was a Navy nurse. And she introduced me to her sister, who was there as a swim coach, aquatics director at the YMCA in Pensacola, Florida. I found her very interesting, but we never really dated then, but we got to know each other a little bit. Well, I left and had to finish flight school in Texas. I thought that relationship was done. I had to move. So I go off to Texas. I finished flight school, and I get the coveted wings of gold. That's what we call them in the Navy. And I had the opportunity, it was kind of a unique chance to go back right away to be an instructor pilot, which doesn't typically happen. And I returned to Pensacola, Florida, and on Interstate 10 heading east, I kept thinking, what was that woman's name? Don't tell Carrie I said that.
Well, she'll see this, Bernie. Okay, go ahead.
She knows the story. I've told her it before. And so I knew where I'd see her. I'd see her in church. So I went to church, and there she was. And so we reignited our friendship, and it just went from there. And then
great.
she actually moved away a few months later to Southern Virginia, a little town called South Boston, Virginia, to be the head aquatics director or swim coach. Well, I had the luxury of doing what we call out-of-area navigation flights, or nicknamed cross-country flights. So I would encourage a lot of my students to want to take cross-country flights, which is a weekend trip. You go up on Friday, come back on Sunday. And I would fly into Raleigh, North Carolina, where her parents lived, which wasn't far from where she was. So I had a lot of Raleigh weekend flights. So one thing led to another, and 40 years later, here we are.
That's great. Now, give me a sequence from the marriage to where you all moved and when your first son and your second child were born. What part of the world were they born in? Kind of give us a sequence from Penn State, Pensacola, you said Texas, kind of all the places that you have put your head down on a pillow.
Yeah, well, that's right. Flight school was Pensacola and Texas, and then then back to Pensacola to instruct for a year and a half. We got married in 1985 when I was leaving that tour, and that's what we call our different places, our tour of duty, the tour. And then I was going to Maine to fly the plane I ultimately became flying, P-3s. And I'll just take a step aside. When I left Penn State, Top Gun had not come out yet, but Officer and Gentleman had.
Ooh.
So walking around in whites was a good thing, our Navy white uniform, because I actually hung out at Penn State for a little while until I started flight school, because it didn't start right after graduation. So wearing that white uniform wasn't bad. So get down to Pensacola, off to Maine. So we got married right when I finished up that tour of duty. So we go to Maine, where I was stationed for 3.5 years, and I would deploy out of there. Went to Spain, went to Iceland, Italy, so forth, for 6-month stints. Our son was born there, so he is a Maine baby. From there, we moved back to Florida, a town called Jacksonville, Florida. I was an instructor pilot again, and that's where our daughter was born. From there, basically, I was up and down Interstate 95. Maine, Florida, Virginia Beach, Pentagon twice, with one left-hand turn where we went out to near Seattle, Washington. And that's where I had what I considered the ultimate tour, and I was in charge of a squadron. They're called commanding officers, or nicknamed skipper, but commanding officers. And I was in charge of the P-3 squadron out there in the state of Washington.
And what base?
Well, it's called Whidbey Island, Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. As the crow flies, it's about 100 miles north of Seattle, about 50 miles farther north here in Canada. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. A little bit isolated, but that's okay. And I deployed from there to Japan and then ultimately the Persian Gulf.
Okay, and so then you got to State College, or what?
Then when I finished that, what we called command tour, back east to the Pentagon, my second Pentagon tour. And while there is when we made the decision that let's try something else in life. I was 41 years old, and I wanted to have enough time, one, to develop a second career, and two, I wanted to give the kids were getting to an age, middle school, early high school, where I wanted to give them stability, as they had been moving every 2 or 3 years. They'd been in a lot of schools. And I'd heard some stories about friends who were having some challenging times with their children as they were trying to make that transition to college, get letters of recommendation, so forth, when they didn't have any stability in the school. So, make a long story short, decided to put my retirement papers in, and I retired from the Navy. FedEx, I interviewed with FedEx at that time, and they said, we want to hire you, but we don't know what's going on with the economy, so we'll get back to you. Well, meanwhile, Penn State had offered me a job in this governmental affairs, political advocacy work. So I also had an opportunity to do defense contracting, which can be much better paying than coming to university. But I really wanted to try something different, take my uniform off and really try a different path. And that's what brought us. Plus, the running joke, of the 20 years I was in the Navy, everybody there knew I was a Nittany Lion. I was not shy about my alma mater. I was very proud where he came from. And obviously the football team tends to be the image you have. But I was proud of a lot of other things they were doing too. But it wasn't bad having some great football teams to support when you're on the road, when you're sitting in Japan. Even basketball, I was saying the other night, I was in Guam watching Penn State beat UNC in basketball in the NCAA playoffs. So I decided to take the job up here. And then when FedEx did call 2 years later, we stayed living here, and I just lived here.
So you've flown all over the world. Have you ever logged how many miles you've been up in the air?
Well, pilots don't log it by miles; they log it by hours.
Okay.
So probably over 20,000.
20,000 up in the air.
Count my military and FedEx time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now your two children, give us a little update on them.
They're grown adults. They both graduated from State College High School. Our son got here at the end of ninth grade, and our daughter got here in sixth grade. When we moved, that's the grades they were in. Our son went to Penn State, so he stayed local. He knew the Penn State fight song before he could talk, because he had to listen to me teach him that while we bathed him in his youth, okay. As he was growing up. And our daughter ended up going to another school called Grove City College. Even though her brother was twisting her arm hard to come to Penn State, I think she wanted to do her own thing. And so she was away, but she wasn't that far away. And but I will tell you, she has a Grove City College sticker on her car, and she has a Penn State sticker on her car. So we consider her a Penn Stater too, just like my wife, even though she didn't go to school here, but she's a Penn Stater. So they did that. Our son was in the College of IST. He took a job in Cleveland, in Eaton Corporation, doing IT work. From there, he decided to make a career change early on after two. I loved it. Great company, speaks very highly of it, and entered the Marine Corps. So he's now a Marine officer living down in North Carolina at a place called Camp Lejeune. Our daughter, a couple of years younger, went to Grove City and swam on that swim team. Another fantastic experience, and a international business minor in Spanish, and now works for the now it's paracycling, like the handicap cycling. She was mainly with the U.S. Olympic Paralympic Committee for years. Now she's switched over to the purely on the paracycling team. So she gets back today from Europe and she helps manage the team. She's not a racer.
That's great. And now, so you're fully retired, and you're how old?
A little younger than you, Greg.
Okay.
But you and I want to put this in there. I first met Greg sitting on a bunch of wooden benches, watching our kids stare at a black line on the bottom of a pool. That's how we got to know each other, right. Watching swimming, and his children, who did very well too in the swimming pool and the swimming world, which launched them into great adult careers and lives.
It's a great way to raise children is through swimming.
That's right. It keeps them so tired they can't get in trouble.
Exactly. Highly recommend that.
Yes.
So you're retired now, and you live here in State College.
Correct.
You know, before I ask you any great questions about your military background and all the exciting adventures you've had all over the world, I want you to share with the audience kind of an average day in your life here as a retired person, and kind of give us an overview of your schedule, maybe the last 2 weeks of as I observe you from afar and catch up with you from time to time. I am in awe of the schedule you keep and with whom and kind of how you pull it all off in a day. So a couple weeks ago, what were you doing?
Well, a couple weeks ago. First, let me back up a little bit. I retired at the age of 61 so I've been retired for 4 years. So now you know how old I am.
Okay.
So in the airline business, when I got hired, you had to retire at 60. While I was working, they changed it to 65, and that's the current age. You have to retire in the major airlines like Delta, FedEx, UPS, so forth. Those of us that got hired when it was 60, FedEx had a little deal that we'll still honor that, and there was some contract stipulations. And so I took advantage of that, and I stayed one extra year. There was a common phrase, a lot of the pilots, and when you're sitting up in the air and you're flying across the Pacific, you have a lot of time to talk. I used to joke that Dr. Phil would join the cockpit and start asking questions. It's kind of like we're doing here. There was a phrase that just stuck with me, and it was like, you can they called it your 60 years, your go years, your 70 years age-wise, or your go slow years, and your 80 years may be your no-go years. Well, I didn't want to miss my go years, and then next thing I know, I can't go. So, because there's a lot of things were always floating around my head and ideas. So I did retire at 61, where some of my peers, they stayed to 65. A lot did. Financially, it probably would have been wiser to do that. But I just had things I still wanted to check out in life, whether it was, I had a dream I was going to do, and I actually did it before I retired, of an Ironman. So I accomplished that, a couple of those. And then, but it tended to work just what else was out there in life, not for money making, but, I grew up, I watched my mother and father volunteer their times a lot. My dad was with the church, volunteered his time with the church. My mom was going on school board meetings and things like that. My dad was very active trying to stop a highway from going in across the road across the street from our house, and he organized something that got that. And I remember listening to my father on the radio, being asked questions well before podcasts were developed.
Okay.
So I saw that growing up, that don't be shy. You got more to give to your neighbors. And I think that resonated with me. I probably couldn't tell you exactly, but there were just things I wanted to do. And one of the projects I did a lot of was to work with veterans. And my wife and I were helping out. There was a Navy League here. I did that for a little bit, but I think I got to know this charity. It was called Knights of Heroes. It was to take originally boys, and then being boys and girls, out and to do things that their dad would do. So why are you worried about what their dad would do? Well, it was geared on, they all lost their father in some sense. They were first responders too, not just military. And this was during some tense times. Gulf War II was going on in 2005, 2006, and so forth. So I got in with them, and I really enjoyed it. We go camping. I remember teaching this. He was 10 years old. He didn't know how to ride a bike. I'm like, come on, we got to ride it. We had a bunch of bikes for the kids, mountain bikes. Try teaching a kid to ride a bike at 9,000 feet, because we camped in the woods in Colorado. So you're running along this kid at 9,000 feet where there's no oxygen. But we did it. And there was a lot of things we did. The idea was, what would your father do that he's not here now? That really opened my eyes to the veteran world. And I was more of an active type person. So we came back, we heard about this program at Penn State at that time. It was called Ability Athlete. So it was for handicapped athletes. At that time, there were a lot of veterans there. So my wife and I would go and help out with the events that were going on camp. It wasn't very big. It was a small program. I'd say over half of the athletes, which may only be 5 or 6, or 10 total, 5 or 6, were veterans coming back banged up from overseas. And in between, I felt like I was home. I was talking to my brothers and sisters. So did that, and that really opened my eyes to that world. So I did a lot of stuff with veteran geared organizations because I felt like I was home. And it wasn't just the Navy, they were in all services. And one thing led to another, and that's where I spent a lot of time. And then I enjoy running and biking. My main hobby is biking. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time.
And so you mentioned that you went up to Martha's Vineyard with some buddies. Tell us about that little trip. It was just two weekends ago, right?
2 weekends ago, I was up there. Matter of fact, my phone's got like 10 texts from that group.
What group? Who are these guys?
Several years ago, a friend of ours recommended to my wife and I, he was our financial advisor, you might want to look at a place down in Florida. You guys love the beach and so forth. And so he told us about a place on the Gulf Coast called Venice, Florida, tiny little town. Those of you who are familiar with State College and this area, I call it Boalsburg with a beach because it's about the size of Boalsburg. And we found a place, a small little condo, and we've been going there since about 2016, 2015.
And you go there from what months of the year?
Oh, about Thanksgiving through mid-April. So November to April. I'd go a little longer if my house didn't need the yard cut back here. But we go down there, and we've really become integrated in the community because a lot of the community are like us. They're temporary. My wife's very active. We can walk into town and it's a couple blocks each direction to the beach. One day I like to ride my bicycle, run and swim. The YMCA down there is another place my wife and I go to almost every day, just like we do here in State College. And one day I was out just riding my bike for my bike ride, a workout, not just beach cruising. I was by myself. I'm around a corner. You talk about why things happen in timing. And there's this guy, and he's on a road bike, but he's not going real fast. As I go around him, he says, we just say hi to each other, which happens all the time. Well, then he starts talking to me. So I thought, I'm not in any hurry. So I slow down. One thing leads to another. He tells me about a local bike group, and he goes, Bernie, why don't you join our bike group? And I said, what is? So I'm looking at this guy thinking, well, he's riding a real bike. It's not probably a casual ride. So now I think, do I do it? Or I just, when I go home, forget about that conversation and press on with life? Well, for some reason, it stuck in my head. So I went. It was like they meet every Saturday or whatever. So I show up on Saturday out of the blue. I could have easily just forgotten about that conversation. And I'm looking, there's about a dozen people, men and women, and I'm profiling all of them because I'm like, can I keep up with these people? How fast are they? And it was a little cool day, January, February day down in Florida. And so we say hi, but no, it's the old, you say hello, but they kind of introduce us, but they're off. And they're very friendly, but they're ready to go. It's 8:00, we're going. And this woman took off like a bat out of hell. And I just thought, oh my gosh, 30 miles at this pace? Well, after about 2 miles, then she took us a break. I thought I was in way over my head. And she stops at a stop sign. She goes, okay, I'm warmed up now. And then we got down to a more pace. It's hard. It's great riding. Well, that group now has grown to be very good friends of ours. And to the point where we do things other than just a ride around that town on a Saturday morning. A group of us who happen to live in New England, one guy lives in Cape Cod, invited us up to his house 2 weekends ago. So about a dozen of us from that riding group, and there's probably about 20 total, and their spouses, because it showed up there. Some of us, hotels, stayed at his house, and we did a ride around Martha's Vineyard. So we kind of took our winter group and became a fall group for one day. But I find it very interesting how that group has grown. And it's a very eclectic group. It's not like all former military or all former academias or stuff like that. And I know we don't all look at life on every issue the same way. But when we're on our bikes, we're on our bikes. And for those weekends and those times, I think I bet a social scientist would have a great job studying us, if they look at our backgrounds.
Well, that's great. So you're in Martha's Vineyard, and then you come back to State College. Tell us about other communities that have been born such as that keep your day full. Like, what other groups are you involved with are similar to this biking group that keep you hopping?
Well, Wednesday afternoons, I got a little running group. We meet behind the Bowl City Brewery.
And how many's in that?
Oh, maybe 6 to 10.
And that's like a regular meeting every Wednesday.
6 o'clock in the evening.
And then you go run, and then afterwards you have a beer?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes you do. It depends what people have to do.
Okay,
and
so that's a Wednesday. Like Thursday morning, what do you do?
Well, Thursday morning is my old grumpy man's breakfast at Wegmans. We meet in the cafe there, and we all got to know each other through a church men's group. And not everybody was in that group. But this morning there were 7 of us. I was there this morning. And we all have, as far as our careers, completely different. 2 were coaches for Joe Paterno on his staff. One was coach in like Maryland, Air Force, Northwestern, Colorado. So guess what we were talking about today? Football. So, and they're very quiet. They don't talk about it. But one was a geologist, other was a banker.
All retired.
All retired.
And you're at Wegmans having a cup of coffee. Does anybody get breakfast?
I do, because I'm always eating.
Okay, good. Okay. So that's another group, and you guys meet every Thursday.
Right.
So your Wednesday afternoon, you're locked in with the running group. Thursday morning, you got the coffee at Wegmans with these coaches and kind of athletic-inspired stories. And you say you go to the Y every day?
Almost.
So tell me what you do at the Y, and who's the community of people there? And is it the same time, same people? Is it like a country club but working out? Tell me about that.
Yes. Yeah. It's if I go at a different time, I might as well go to Philadelphia YMCA. It's a whole different group. I will go every now and then to a different time. My wife and I, it turns out, I didn't know this, are very disciplined in that world as far as trying to be active and moving and so forth. And we've been that our whole life. My wife will walk for an hour and a half every day. Right now, she is so furious because her knee's bothering her. She's not out walking.
The 60s are our go decade.
Yes, and she's halfway through the 60s. So it was interesting. Being an airline pilot, I'd be home for 2 weeks and gone for 2 weeks. In simple terms, or home a week, gone a week, something like that. So when I'm home, it's not like I'm going to the office. I'm home. So it's almost like retirement life in a sense. Of course, you're catching up on home work.
So you've worked your whole career to kind of hone this kind of, when you had a week off, you would pack it with activities.
Around here, yeah.
Got it.
And you try to do some of your home administrative work, banking while you're on the road, because thankfully we can do that nowadays. So I thought it very interesting. Right after I retired December of 2020, December 31st. It's almost, so that spring, because I think we went down to Florida then, I get into the Y, and it's the same crowd, because I usually go between 8 and 10 in the morning or so. It's the same crowd, but I knew a lot of them were retired. All of a sudden, I was welcomed to the retired club, as if they knew I was retired. I hadn't said anything.
So tell me about that community. Like, guys are swimming, you guys joking around, and you guys are lifting. And is it like it's just a community of? Is it fun? Fun with a purpose. You're exercising.
Right. And it's another eclectic crowd. You do your workout. For example, yesterday I was getting done swimming. I'm walking out, and I ran into this woman I knew. And she introduced me to her friend. She's getting her friend ready for an Ironman coming up. And I hadn't seen her in a little bit. And I've ridden bikes with her, and I've seen her at a couple races. So we catch up there. If I would have gone into the fitness center, I probably would have run into this one guy. He was a teacher, but he was a umpire for baseball for years. So we're talking sports with him.
Sam Phillips, right?
No,
it's not Sam. Okay,
it's not Sam. But things like that. So you just kind of walk around, you just catch up.
Okay,
see people, neighbors.
And so, but you're every day running into human beings in these communities. and so, like, every day is scheduled, but it's the human connection is what I marvel at. And now you've kind of given me a clue, because you had these weeks off or 2 weeks off when you were young. Those were kind of like you were in the air for a whole week, and then you come back, you want to exercise, you want to get out, you want to feel fresh air, and you develop these friendship pods.
But yes, and they're different pods because there's a biking group up here too. I used to joke, like in the Navy and with FedEx particularly. When I worked Penn State, I'd go in at 7:30, come home 5:30 or something like that, and you could meter out your life. Okay, I'll get this tomorrow.
Meter out your life.
You didn't have to do it all together, because I kind of looked at my life like I had to do things in binges because I'd be away. So if I'm home, I got to do like get the yard cut, get this cut, do that stuff, or get the miles in running or biking now because I can't do it tomorrow. When I was in the Navy, it was similar on deployments, but like when you deploy somewhere. Now, my plane did not fly off the aircraft carrier because I was saying earlier, I went to flight school before Tom Cruise started with Top Gun, but I was going to be Tom Cruise. I mean, when I left Penn State, you're looking at the future Tom Cruise. He would have had nothing on me until day one of flight school, and they measured me and said, "Son, you're too tall for ejection seats." So I had I ended up going either patrols planes or helicopters. I went patrol planes. But those planes were too big to fly off the carrier. So we'd pick up our entire squadron and go somewhere for 6 months and operate. And the mission of my plane was to, at that time, and the Cold War was going strong, was to track Soviet submarines. So we were basically a submarine hunter, so to speak. It evolved, as the Cold War stopped and so forth. But one thing that happened there, that group, you became very tight with your other pilots, navigators, your mechanics. If you go on my not that Facebook's that big a thing for me, but I would bet 90%, 80% of the people on Facebook are either some of my sailors or fellow pilots and stuff like that. And it's a way we can keep up with each, because we're all over the country. But that unity was why I stayed in to the Navy, because I was getting out. I was going to do my minimum and get out, whether it's go into engineering or go to the airline. And I put my letter in to resign. I was actually getting out. And you had to give it at 9 months in advance in the Navy. It wasn't a 2-week notice. A couple weeks after I put my letter of resignation in, my wife and I were eating at the worst Mexican restaurant in Maine. Pretty far away from Mexico. It was terrible. But we were there. And she looked at me and she said, "Bernie, why are you getting out of the Navy?" So we talked about it, and she goes, "Don't get out because of me. I can support this lifestyle." So we stayed in. And it was that camaraderie. It wasn't the missions. I love the missions. I love feeling important. And a lot of times, like I did one tour where I was actually stationed on the aircraft carrier. I wasn't flying. But I'd sit there and go, this is kind of important stuff. And that felt good. I felt like I was making a difference. I wasn't the headlines of the Washington Post, thankfully, or anything like that. But I knew in the big picture, I was part of it. And that was, I enjoyed that feeling. I felt important, that servant type of thing.
Yeah, and that unity, your son now has gone into the military. He made a pivot from a corporate career in IST, information technology. Was it the unity, the bond, the brotherhood? Is that what attracted him to make such a career shift?
My wife does blame me for this. You're right. He worked for Eaton Corporation for 2 years, came home at Christmas time, was really enjoying it. He was coaching a high school at the time, too, swimming. So we couldn't get in touch with him. He was so busy. And he had a smile on his face. He was liking it. So he came home for Christmas after doing this for 2 years, and he pulls me aside. This is a couple days before Christmas. He said, "Dad, I think I'm going to go in the Marine Corps, but don't tell Mom till after Christmas." So we talked about it, why, and he went through. He didn't really, I didn't know what his why was at that time yet, but we got through it. He leaves, tells Mom the day before he's leaving to go back to Cleveland to work that he was going to put his application in. And it's a long process. It was going to take like 6-7 months. My wife looks at me and, "This is your fault." I said, "Well, we're having a drawdown now in the military. it's going to be tough for him to get in. Again, I was wrong, and he got in. So yeah, he's doing. And the reason she says it's my fault because she's heard he's stuck with me. So he's heard stories. He's watched the friendships, the Oregon games, lifelong Navy friends coming into town. His son is like my son. His son did the same, very similar path as my son did. And when he was going to Penn, his son went to Penn State as well. And his parents would come up from Maryland, and he'd go, "Oh, here comes my dad and Mr. Ryan telling their stories again." But my wife's convinced, that we saw it was a positive experience for our family. Now, not everybody had that. I'd say a few didn't, and for various reasons. We were very fortunate. We lived in wonderful places. We had wonderful friends. The career worked out, and my children have very positive experiences from that time. So I think that kind of set the groundwork for him.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned kind of your early attraction to the adaptive athletic program here at Penn State. And, back to the community that you're bouncing from pod to pod of these community friendship groups, you're very much involved with the Penn State Adaptive Athletic Program, which fills quite a bit of your schedule up. Why are you so deeply involved with that program and all the success you guys as volunteers have pulled off in the last couple of years? Kind of speak to the crew of people that are volunteers who are spread all over the country, who are just driven by this vision and mission that you guys have for this program.
Well, thanks for mentioning that. Like I mentioned earlier, the veteran aspect got me interested in that. And then when my daughter went to work for the Paralympic Committee, that really opened my eyes to make it bigger than this. But we were helping out, and like I said, I enjoyed talking to those athletes. And then I saw an opportunity to really make this bigger with some of the ties I had from the military side. But about that time, the director of that program was about to retire, and she did. And then COVID hit. So the whole thing shut down. They actually hired a replacement for her. I don't know if he even showed up for day one before Penn State shut the program down.
And before you keep going on, explain what this program is so the viewer understands.
We call it adaptive athletics. That is the common term nowadays for someone who has a physical disability. And how can they compete in a sport? You may remember in Paris, we have the Olympics and the Paralympics for the summertime. And I noticed in this Paris events, NBC covered it. They never showed, when they had their logo, it never just said Olympics or Paralympics. It had both terms on it from the beginning, through the Olympics, through the Paralympics. It's starting to get some recognition, but it's for that physically challenged, whether it's spina bifida, something from birth, cerebral palsy. It could be an accident. And that's where I was seeing the military people, step on an IED, they lose a leg. And we had some incredible athletes, and given them the opportunity, provide them the opportunity to continue to participate and not be on the sideline wondering why this happened to me or why am I different. So that was kind of part of the service. When I saw that got started, well, when it died off, my daughter's out there working in the Paralympics, and I'm talking to different people. Through connections, I get a phone call. And I was getting nowhere with it. I couldn't get Penn State to get going. Penn State obviously was having a lot of different issues going on. They were going through athletic directors and things like that. Because in Penn State, the program had resided in the athletic department, which actually is unique. Most colleges don't have it in their athletic department. Some have it in student affairs. Some have it in their College of Education, like Alabama. And before I continue, premier programs that I was using as a model was the University of Alabama, University of Arizona, University of Illinois, and now Michigan has just put it into afterburners. They weren't much in the beginning, but they have a very strong program. And to give all of them credit, every single one of them would answer my phone call when I call and ask for help or suggestions. And, they use that analogy, a rising tide lifts all ships. And that's what they're looking at. They're trying to get the awareness out there to spread it. So I got a phone call from someone who had donated to this program when the previous director, a woman named Terry Jordan, had run it. And he knew a couple of the people that had donated considerable amount of money. In my world, it's considerable. In the $50 million to Beaver Stadium, it's not. But so he knew some of the donors, but he wasn't real versed on the operations side of it. And I gotten to know it fairly well. So the two of us have been working together. We've built up this team. we've called it Rise Above, and we've built a network. Penn State has hired a director, and it does. Dr. Pat Kraft started up again in the athletic department. This year we have our first group of athletes that are recruited. There are one or two that were here, but they didn't realize there was a program because it was not publicized. We're still having some publicity issues. So our main job in the Rise Above group is an awareness and obviously fundraising. We want to be able to give scholarship, help them defray their college costs, and then help, Penn State, what we'll see, how they bring it into the fold with, paying for competitions, travel, and so forth. The NCAA is also wrestling with this because there is no true NCAA program. We don't have regulations like a varsity athlete at Penn State has to worry about with coaches. It will come, but it's not there. So the Olympic Committee, or Paralympic Committee, and the NCAA are working together to figure out where do we go next. Well, meanwhile, colleges like Michigan and Alabama are running with this program and building it and filling a void for those out there that would like to participate, not only at the elite level to make it to the Paralympics, but at the recreational level. And I tell people, I'm still waiting for the Phillies to call me. I know they're going to call me, but I was a recreational athlete at Penn State. I said there's 15 men on the Penn State basketball team, but there's probably 15,000 intramural players. And we would like to provide the opportunity for an individual to proceed as far as they can. How far can I take my abilities? Or provide the opportunity to get them out of their dorm, get them out of their apartment, meet another group of people, and become active. And that's what we're working on. There's a community sled hockey team that has a couple of students from Penn State. Coach Godowski has been amazing with his varsity players. We're starting up a wheelchair basketball team. We had our first practice last week. Both the men and women's, particularly the women's team, varsity teams have been very involved, just like Coach Godowski's team. We had a camp this summer for middle school and high school kids on wheelchair basketball, just like the sports camps they have for all the other sports. And Coach Keeger's players came over there, whoever were here in the summer, which was most of the team. She made them run over to the White Building from practice at the BJC, and we were having our final tournament. It was like a 3-day camp, and at the end we had games. When those women walked in,
and this is the women's basketball varsity team
showed up, and they had T-shirts, and we had awards to give at the end of camp. They actually presented the awards to the campers, and they threw some shirts out. The energy level in the White Building went through the roof. It was incredible. And then who came in with them? Well, here comes the Nittany Lion in a wheelchair rolling in.
Wow.
And who came in right before the Nittany Lion? Sue Paterno.
Great.
So Sue Paterno and Dana Harris, Franco's widow, have become very involved in this. So we're just trying to build awareness, build the program. The 6 athletes we have.
So you have 6 now.
We brought in 6.
And they're from all over the country?
All over the world.
And you recruited them to come into this adaptive athletic program in the athletic department at Penn State.
Right.
And they now have a coach for them. And speak to some of these athletes so we can kind of...
Well, we have 6 that we recruited in the traditional recruiting sense. We didn't get everybody we wanted because Penn State doesn't have at least 6, God bless them, they're going out on a limb to support us. They are the...
Pioneers.
They are paving the way to restart this program. And they're putting their faith in us that they came here because these athletes and student athletes could have gone to those other schools I mentioned very easily because they were being recruited by those other ones. One boy came from Israel. He flew in from Israel. One boy came from California. He's Hispanic. His dad is on a work visa, has now moved from California. He was a mechanic there, has moved to Pennsylvania to be near his son just for the support. Also, we need to get some in-state tuition. He's now working for my brother in the construction business down in Bedford. So Angel is what an athlete. I mean, everything he touches, he can do. He's one of those, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair racing. What else has he been doing? Sled hockey. Coach Godowski has a charity game where he puts his players in sleds. They play the local sled hockey team to raise money for the sled hockey team. Well, one of our recruiting visits, we brought Angel from California in. He scored all the goals on the sled hockey team. Well, most of them. I don't know. He scored all of them. But anyway, so he's here. And then we have a young student from Scranton, from Philadelphia, and a woman who lives here, a co-ed that lives here. Her mother works for Penn State. She came from Columbus, Ohio, and she's a track racer. So we have a Blade Runner who was actually on an Apple Watch ad.
And what's his name?
Jack Cunningham.
And he's from a high school outside of
Philadelphia.
And he's running, he's a fast runner.
Yeah, but you know what? He's also going to play wheelchair basketball. I don't know if he's going to hop in his sled or not, but one of our alums, who was a former athlete here, Jeff Hintz, is a lawyer in Pittsburgh. I'll never forget, he said, I came here, I don't know why he's in a wheelchair, but he's in a wheelchair, to learn sports. I didn't know what I wanted, but the ability to try different sports was key. He ended up going to London for the javelin in a wheelchair. So he went to the Paralympics in London. So the idea of, you think you may like this, but maybe there's something else out there if we can give them that opportunity. There's a young lady who was in a bus accident down in Harrisburg, near Harrisburg. She's still, a couple years ago, she's paralyzed from the waist down. She's, obviously the mental aspects of going through her life has completely changed. She will probably come here next year. She wants to play tennis. So there's those things. One of the things that really opened my eyes, and I just throw it out there, a very good friend of mine from my Navy days, when I retired, he stayed in. He made admiral. He ended up falling. He became paralyzed in 2018. He and I played a lot of basketball together. He played basketball at the Naval Academy. He was about 2 years younger than me, but we were good friends, and it seemed like everywhere I went, he showed up 2 years later. It was fun. And when he became paralyzed, he got into the sporting world. He was an athlete to begin with. So all this kind of built up, and he opened my eyes to a lot, helped me a lot. He actually wanted the job up here, but it was COVID time and it was a mess, so he didn't come.
So when you refer to this expression, open your eyes, and there's a clear path through this whole podcast that something's pulling you forward, and as you open your eyes and see 2020, like, what is it that you would want to share with the audience that is pulling you forward? It's a common thread through your whole career and even your children, or...
I think we want to be bigger than ourselves. We can be, and I think I can give more than what I've done. So I grew up in a family like that. I didn't think about it, but now that you ask me, it becomes, I didn't think about it, I just did it. So I know I'm supposed to be a tough Navy pilot. I'm pretty embarrassed now.
No, don't be.
No, but I think what's pulling me through, to see a smile on a face, a kid gets to do something, or an adult. Years ago when I was working with those boys who lost their dad, they're hungry. So we would be mentors and stuff like that. Well, just carry that forward. Now here's somebody that maybe they got a raw deal in life. They were born that way, or they had an accident. And I've been very fortunate it hasn't happened to me, yet. Hopefully it won't, or my family. But the opportunity just to be them, and not to second guess themselves. But like I said, the fun they can have, the opportunities, and to see them smack talking each other, just like I did in my days, it makes you go, okay, we're getting somewhere.
And so this group, you guys are all volunteers. This Rise Above, you guys just decided to start a nonprofit as a booster club. It's just kind of, you're raising money, you're holding events. You had Sue Paterno at a major event this summer. But what, all of you, there's 6, there's 10, there's 12 of you guys, mostly retired, some are in full-time careers. Yeah. What's that force pulling you forward to help?
Well, those 6, none of us are the same. It's almost like a basketball team. You have guards that can't be forwards and forwards that can't be a guard. So out of the 6 of us, okay, my background. The other gentleman who we kind of got it started, he called me up. He just had a passion for it, and I'd rather have him tell him. But from my observations, he just had a passion. It's just in his heart. His heart's the size of Texas, and he was over. He had, through acquaintances, he knew the coach, the previous director, Terry Jordan, and that's what really, just through a friendship, he saw the world, and it just got his attention. He got to go to Beijing, so forth. The other people, one was a participant in this program years ago. On the more on the recreational side, we have a couple of the former superstar athletes who are more as advisors to us. But the day in and day out workers So I talked about those three, the recreational worker. He's active in the Alumni Association. Young man graduated in 2012 from Penn State. I reached out to the alumni magazine, the Penn Stater. I said, do you guys know we got this program going? And they put an article in about our director. Our director's name is Brenna O'Connor. So I interviewed her, and it was in the magazine, and that found a guy named Joe Klaus, who has a passion out of the goodness of his heart to help fundraise for handicap programs. So this was, and he's a Penn Stater. He was on the golf team at Penn State. I mean, he checked a lot of boxes in this program. And then we have a gentleman who's just a Penn State grad, who is an accountant, so he's our treasurer. Lives out in Pittsburgh, has been very active in different philanthropic events and just loves sports and just got smitten by this. And the other gentleman, his daughter was born with spina bifida. He raised her and other children, but she ended up playing 5 years of wheelchair basketball for Arizona, was the coach and a captain of that team. So getting her to different athletic events and doing things. He is in charge of the air ambulance, the helicopters down in Hershey, our medical school, medical hospital. So he has a wealth of knowledge, of experience of being in that world for 20 plus years. So it's a very diverse group that comes together with a sole purpose. And we're not all the same, which is very helpful.
And that key word, sole purpose, I like that. How's that soul spelt? But anyway,
yeah,
well,
right.
As you've said a couple times, you opened your eyes to it. So I often talk about, these eyeglasses that we see through and the commonality of you 6 or 8 of you volunteers, and you got emotional. I got emotional hearing your story, but what is the clarity we're seeking that maybe you have had your eyes open to that has enriched? Like you said, you want to be bigger than yourself. We talk about meaning and purpose in life. Why I invited you is it seemed that you radiate joy and you're being pulled forward by what I'm trying through the podcast to illustrate is this clarity. Is it heart? Is it love? And how do we teach this?
Yes.
Yes and yes.
It is all that. But I don't know what it is. It just is. It just happens. And I can't speak for the others, but I get a sense for them. They're doing it just because they want to. And it just feels like
it feels, and it causes an emotional reaction. And,
but these athletes, and we'll stay focused on athletes.
Yes,
this could be in a myriad of different things.
Right.
It could be helping the local school.
Right.
We can see results. We can see a void that we want to help fill. But it's not going to help us because I can't get in that wheelchair and play the game. They have to. But at the end of the day, you go home and going, I think I made a difference today in somebody's life.
Well, the old expression is the more you give, the more you get. And you guys exhibit that you get so much out of it by giving so much. And it's just a win-win, It's infectious. Internally, it's infectious. And I think for others, I got invited to talk to a breakfast group of old retired, I shouldn't say. Yeah, tell about you. Last Thursday, 9/11, where were you?
Oh, well, that's a different project.
Okay,
but just to finish this, there was a group of guys that get together, former Penn State administrators and professors, and they bring people in to talk. They meet at the Good Time Cafe every Friday morning, and they asked me to talk about the program. There's 2 guys there. I probably have 3 texts from them right now, every day. They're trying to help. It caught their attention. And I think it's because this program in particular, and we all have programs that catch our attention, but this is something that's been kind of lurking in the background and needs some light shined on it. Eventually, it will be very second nature to people, and they'll be used to this, but it's still new. And as a gentleman told me one time, and I steal this line all the time, in the sports world, this push is kind of like the Title IX for our generation, for this era, not our generation, for this era. It's a real eye-opener to people and we may have to kind of force it a little bit to make people, but I don't think Penn State needs to be forced. They just need to be pulled along and shown what the opportunities are.
And back to that push-pull, I've just been fascinated with what pulls us along and what pushes us, we talk a lot about mitigating fear and defaulting to fear versus defaulting to heart, defaulting to love. What are your thoughts on that? Is it, like you say, it's infectious, it's emotional, in a world where we're taught to kind of mitigate our emotion and be more functional, practical, and logical, and yet, as the audience can see, you've followed a different operating system of love over fear, and you've done a lot of cool things because you're just we call it design thinking, the iterative process of continually following a kind of a North Star that's pulled you along versus somebody like pushing you. You pull.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be pushed because then you're probably not happy. If you're pulled, that means you're going, well, I mean, they could be pulling you, but I think when you got to be happy and, it's sad. It's tough when you see people slugging it out in life and they're not happy. And I don't have any real examples of that, but I know it's out there. But I feel one thing, if you go through life with a smile on your face, even if you're not happy, it kind of helps and helps get through the day. Not every day is pleasant. Even working with this adaptive athlete program, there's some frustrating time, a lot of frustrating times. But it's amazing how one thing can all of a sudden make you forget about all those tough phone calls or, hang-ups or so forth. And the same thing in the Navy. You're trying to do things. I was very blessed to have some very good leaders. Not all of them, but it allowed Bernie Ryan to maybe make a fool of himself, and pick himself back up and go again, and not have to pay big consequences. No, they weren't serious mistakes, but there were mistakes I made along the way, and I had to answer for them. But I was still allowed to press forward, and I learned a lot from my leaders, and hopefully I was able to, when I got into their positions, do the same thing.
And what's that military expression? Embrace the suck. Is that what you're kind of addressing it to?
Embrace the suck. Yeah, that's when things are pretty rough. Just get through it.
Well, and back to pulling, in the military careers especially, you got to grind and you got to embrace the suck, which is their kind of one of the branches motto, I guess. But something pulls you through. And you said, is it to be bigger than yourself in a sense, or a higher purpose, or is that helps pull you through it?
It can be. Now, the military is very structured, and if you stay in that structure, it can be very, okay, I need to go to this set of orders, and then my next set of orders have to be this, and then my next set of orders, and you can do that. And that's, let's say your goal is to be an admiral or a general, and that's not everybody's on the officer side. But there's ways and you can do that very methodically. And some people did succeed that. What you find, though, most of the people that get up to those senior levels, they had some individuality in them. They weren't just cut and dry. Yeah, you embrace the suck, the tough times, having to say goodbye to your family on the ramp and fly away for 6 months, different things like that. Those aren't fun, but you work through it. Obviously my kids, I think, are okay, and we work through it. But you learned teamwork, but you had goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and that helped pull you through. And everybody in the military had different. It sounds like it's the same from the outside. It looks like the same, but we all had different ones. Some guys, all they wanted from in my world, all they want to do is fly airplanes. Well, you can't make a career in the military, in the Navy particularly, just being a pilot. You had to be a leader. You had to take on senior leadership roles. So if you decided that, you limited yourself on how far you could go. So how you manipulated your career really became your identity.
And kind of wrapping up here, but touch upon servant leadership versus dictatorial leadership, kind of top down versus kind of transformational servant leadership. What have you learned in your career about the different approaches to leadership and the impact on you to help pull you through or push you through in the case of top down?
Well, top down, sometimes you need both. Yep. Sometimes you need a dictatorial.
Situational, yes.
Yep. There's no time to be, you just got to get it done. And you also learn a lot from good and bad leaders. So I like to say I learned a lot, servant leadership pulled me through. It felt better, from my way I was raised. And I had great examples, but I had a couple of dictatorial leaders, and I learned from them too. And I also learned when you needed to be, had to be a leader. And sometimes you're not popular. You have to make that decision that's not popular. And I also saw people that were trying to get in leadership, and they wanted to be the popular one. They wanted everybody to like them. And that's not going to work. You can't always be liked by everybody. So I love the mission, and I think I love to fly. I love the camaraderie. And that just kind of all built, and it just kind of happened. And as that camaraderie, the mission, the purpose, it just built on each other. And as I got more senior, I realized what pleased me, maybe in my early days, was flying. I just wanted to fly. I always liked to fly. But as I got older and got into more senior leadership positions, the opportunity to lead and to guide and provide for my sailors. I remember a couple of years ago, I got a guy who, so you're talking about 2001, I'm in charge of squadron. And around 2015, I got a call from a old sailor. It happens from time to time. And I remember I hadn't heard from him in a long time. It turns out he works with my daughter. He said, Mr. Ryan, I remember you told me I need to go to college. I should get out and maybe do Navy ROTC, because he was a mechanic, worked on the planes. And he was a sharp kid, and I just thought I could see it in him. He wanted more. He goes, should have listened to you. But he's doing fine. He's doing very well for himself. But that's the type of stuff, when you get those phone calls, you go, maybe it was okay. Those tough days you forget about. And it's those type of things that you remember.
Well, and I'm dabbling again, just in that last couple sentences. You said you'd love this, you'd love that, you love that. And it's a misunderstood word, but I
enjoyed it.
You're exuding it. And I work with young college students and work on North Star and kind of visualizing their life. And there's an expression in entrepreneurship: you have to be in love with solving a business problem. Okay. So that's starting to come into the language now, that you have to be in love with solving a business problem. That's the only way you're going to persist to kind of see it through and get punched over and over. And, and there's this expression, and education is to teach the head and the hands and the heart. We want to raise the full child or whatever through education. But someone the other day, a career teacher, challenged me when I said, I want to teach heart, and he said, you can't teach heart. You can only teach head and hands, and that's what curriculums are designed to do. The syllabus is, we have to get these kids ready through skill sets, and so we have some fun debate about, where does love fit into business? Where does it fit into education? Where is heart taught? Is it through just reading Shakespeare? Like, are there curriculums on what we just talked about for 45 minutes that you just lived, you're 65, your whole career, all the way from your parents, and what you said about your upbringing, and you saw them in a service role. You saw them, giving, not taking, giving. And, so that's gone to you. Now it's gone to your children. And yet we want to bring, in a world driven by fear right now, what you're speaking to is what could help so many people understand as they navigate trying to figure things out. And what's going to fill that void of, they seem to be struggling now on how to things filled back, fill the void. Okay.
I hope they don't think their first job out of college, they've got to be in love with it. It's going to take time to develop.
Sure.
And I think that's unrealistic and idealistic if you think that's going to happen. Let's talk about Southwest Airlines, Herb Keller. He loved that job. He was he was out on the ramp talking to baggage loaders, up in the cockpit, talking to pilots, talking to gate agents, and that was infectious. My friends that flew for Southwest Airlines, when Herb Keller, stepped aside, they were not happy. But he developed it. That didn't happen overnight, but he had a love with his vision. Why do I want to be doing this? He wanted to provide that transportation and that opportunity. We can go on over other examples. So I think that I don't want those college students to think that it's got to be day one after graduation. It evolves. It's just got to be, as long as it's planted, it'll germinate. And it may take a long time to germinate, and you're not going to realize it is. And you look back, and maybe along the way you'll see that. And you want them to chase their dreams, but sometimes you got to slug it out. You got to go to IBM or go to Hershey Chocolate Company, do the work. And hopefully you'll like it, and you realize you're a piece of a big picture, and you're a necessary piece for that. I just don't want to get false hopes up that everything is unicorns and
right,
all that stuff.
Well, you made a great point. Planting the seeds. Any advice on listener or for me in helping plant the seeds? What I'd call the head, the hands, and the heart. Where in my observations, a lot of the seeds need to be planted at age 17 or 18 when they're coming in there. So what advice would you give to help the student, or even me, my age, crystallize that compass on making the XY decisions going forward to follow a purposeful path? What are the seeds?
This is cliche and stuff, but don't be afraid. Believe in yourself. I was very fortunate. Even when I was a part-time working on the Hershey farms, my supervisor, this sounds silly, but he said, go paint those barnyard fences. So that was he wasn't sitting there telling me which stroke to use, to brush them. He just said, go do it. And I think about it, that kind of started me. And my parents, my dad said, gave me some opportunities to start my own little business on the family farm, a little gentleman's farm we had. So those all build up to it. But if you don't have that opportunity, it'll start somewhere. Okay, maybe mine started at 14, and I didn't even know it at the time. But don't be afraid to take a chance. Now, I don't want to take a foolish chance,
right?
But calculated risks are okay. And don't be, and this has been said 1,000 times, I know, but don't be afraid of failure. Now, sometimes in your career, unfortunately, failure is recognized real quick, and it can really set you back. And some people don't allow people to try something and fail and move on. I was very fortunate. I had a couple leaders that allowed me, and I did fail a couple of times, and they smacked me around and picked me up and said, get going again. And I like to think I learned from that and hopefully operate the same way. But fear is a scary thing. It can really limit you. And I hope we pass that on to our children, my people I served with and so forth. But don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to be an oddball a little bit.
I want to end on that because that's good, because that's what I've read is you can't have heart and love along with fear at the same time. You have to mitigate one to move with the other, and fear is what pushes you, but love and heart is what pulls you. So I think you just
don't be blind, love. You got to keep your eyes open.
Well, that's right. That's why it's the compass, and that's why
the compass is that North Star is very important.
Very important to pull you through. So Bernie, I want to thank you tremendously. This was a great debut podcast kickoff. So thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me.
This has been the Clarity Compass, and I want to thank our guest, Bernie Ryan, for a wonderful kickoff to our series. Thank you.